Hey guys, this is Grandmaster Eugene Perelshteyn, and we're going to cover the Sicilian defense as black and specifically talk about various possibilities that white can throw at you, which is the opening after e4, c5. Now, one very important thing to remember, the difference between the c5 move and the e5 move is that black is trying to trade his side pawn for white's center pawn. And that's sort of the strategic implication of this opening. For example, after knight f3, black has many different moves here. e6, d6, g6, knight c6, even a6. I'm going to show you the moves that I like the most, but just to kind of show you the most popular is this d6 move, and after takes, takes. Notice black has two central pawns against one, and the most popular variation of the Sicilian is called the Najdorf. This move a6 is aimed to stop the bishop and the knight jumping to b5. Black tries to gain the center, and this is very, very sharp. There's lots of theory. For instance, the move bishop g5, you got to know a lot of theory, as well as bishop e3, f3. This is called the so-called English attack. Now, black can also play the dragon. This is a very popular opening and very sharp opening. But again, the drawback is after bishop e3, bishop g7, white can sort of set up this attacking formation, right? Similar as the English attack. This is called the Yugoslav variation. And as Bobby Fischer used to say, h4, h5, prise open the h file with checkmate coming. A little risky, I have to say. I used to play the dragon when I was a kid, and there is a way to still play it without allowing any of this attack. Let me show you. If we go all the way back, so after the move c5, knight f3, black can start with the move knight c6 or g6. Knight c6, though, invites bishop to b5. This is called the Rasalimo variation. It's a totally different opening altogether. Now, I actually like this move g6. This is my favorite move. This is a way of playing the dragon without allowing that annoying attacking formation. And this is actually called the hyper accelerated dragon. Notice that I'm keeping the knight here. And after d4 takes, takes. Now you can play knight c6, knight c3. One drawback, though, of the accelerated dragon move order is c4 is the Marat bind, where white grabs the space and covers this d5 square. So as a matter of fact, you can try to sidestep this with this interesting move order, knight f6. And this is kind of important tactic in a lot of these positions. Look at the king, look at the pawn. White actually loses the pawn by force. So this is a mistake. You're hitting the king and you're picking up the pawn. So white typically protects with knight c3. Now you can play knight here. Notice c4 is not allowed. One of the small drawbacks is after knight takes, taken with the b pawn, normally is the right idea, but here it doesn't work because of e5, and white gets really fast counterplay with bishop here, queen here, hitting this pawn. So I would have to take with the d pawn and go for this endgame, which is not the end of the world. You do lose the right to castle, but as we know in the endgame, it's not that bad. So white typically answers bishop e3 if they don't want to enter the endgame. And here is the classic accelerated dragon position. For example, white plays f3, castles, queen d2, and we hit him with d5. This is a big, big difference, right? White hasn't castled. And lots of people already start to fall apart here. For instance, after e takes d, you can take with the knight, hitting this bishop. And if they take here, you can take with the queen, again hitting this knight. And after knight takes, queen takes. One of the shortest wins of my career was against the master after he played c3, bishop f5. He was afraid of the rook coming here. He was scared of castling it into the attack. He played queen f2, and bam, 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 picking up the rook, game over. So you see, this is very, very risky line for white. Therefore, I like this move g6. So do you have any questions so far?
What do you do as black if they do queen takes d4 after
All right,
d4
good
happens?
question. Yeah, so one of the, because the knight is still in b8, one of the ideas they can take with the queen. Queen is once again very exposed here, and after knight f6, e5, knight c6, white has a chance to go wrong. Both queen d1 and queen h4 logical moves are bad. For instance, because remember I showed you this tactic earlier, you can execute this tactic right now. Takes, temporarily sacrificing the piece, winning the pawn in the process, check, and after they block, you pick up the knight with check. This is very important tactic. Therefore, white has to move the queen right here, and she still gets attacked. After knight here, knight b6 is coming, and the main line goes like this: queen e4, hitting this knight, knight b6, knight c3, d5, pawn takes, bishop f5, and if pawn takes, you take with the bishop, because pawn was attacking the queen. Queen is under attack, and once again, she has to move. Typically, they try to go back. Black's already much better with rook e8 and knight b4 ideas. Very fast, rapid development. So that's the key idea. Now, there are other type of Sicilians. There are Sicilians where white does not play d4. We're going to talk about them shortly. For example, this move c3. White can also play c3 on move 2. This is called Alapin Sicilian. And it's not that dangerous for black. The main line is knight f6, but I still like this move g6 even here. The point is take, and now very important, d5, right? White has to take or push the pawn. If white takes, knight f6, you're going to win the d pawn, and we're going to have a classic case of IQP. This d4 pawn is weak. It's called isolated queen pawn. And if white plays e5, which is best move, after bishop here, knight here, bishop g4 pins the knight. And then you're going to develop the knight to either c6 or d7. I prefer d7 just to avoid any damage to the pawn structure. And when white castles, you can play e6, knight bd2. You can kick the bishop back to d3 or e2. Knight goes here, right here, everything gets traded, and this position is quite comfortable for black. Black knight can go to f5 or c6. Black usually castles, queen goes to b6. This looks like a French defense, but without the bad bishop on c8. And finally, one other line that I kind of like, especially the line that Garry Kasparov used a lot in simul's when he played low-rated players, he played this unusual move a6. At first it sounds kind of weird. You're not developing any of the pieces. But the point is after d4, takes, again, you have the same tactical idea. After e5 here, attacking the e-pawn, you pick up the pawn with check. So it's very important to be aware of this tactic. And white typically answers here. And remember, d6 will transpose right into the Najdorf. But here, Kasparov and many others play this move e5, forcing the knight back, bishop b4, pressuring this knight, pressuring this pawn. White typically answers with bishop d3, black and castle, and then later can take and play for d5 with pretty easy game. So this is called the O'Kelly variation. Again, after the move a6 on move 2. So this is another way to play this setup. Any other questions?
Yeah, how do you play against the Grand Prix attack as black?
Yeah, good question. As a matter of fact, I do recommend Grand Prix in my Chessable course and in my books, Chess Openings or White Explain. It starts with the move knight c3, f4, bishop g7, knight f3. And the point of the Grand Prix is after knight c6, you can play both bishop c4, bishop b5. And knight d4 typically is played after bishop b5. It's not that bad. My move is a4 for white to try to kind of trick black a little bit into playing d6 or e6 so that white can play after d6, bishop b5, and the knight can go to d4. But here, if I were black, I actually recommend this move a6. Now bishop b5 is not happening. Bishop c4 is not happening. And if white plays d4, thinking that he has an excellent version, right, of the open Sicilian, well, there's a really cool tactic, d5. The point is no matter how white takes that d pawn, it's not going to be great for him. Knight takes e6, and because this knight is under attack, anywhere the knight retreats, queen takes d4, picks up the other knight. White's down a piece, and if pawn takes, knight f6, bishop c4, here it comes in handy to have the pawn there, and as you can see, this d pawn is lost. Black can even castle next, win the pawn with very easy game. Why? Because in all of these positions, black will be left with the e7 pawn. So does that answer your question about the Grand Prix?
Yeah. So what if this position, let's say they go knight d e2? Is that
Yeah,
defending
to
the
try
pawn?
to hold on to the pawn.
Yeah.
Good question. So you can start with b4 immediately to win this pawn, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you want, but you can first insert castles, and then this pawn is gone. This knight has to retreat, and you just pick it up for free.
Ah, very good. So
Yeah.
that's answered my question for this opening. But how about the Smith-Morra Gambit?
Yeah, so a lot of people like the Smith-Morra Gambit because white plays this move d4 and sacks the c3 pawn, while I completely think that this gambit is playable for black. It is relatively theoretical, meaning that black has to know precisely what he's doing because he is behind in development at the moment. So it's okay. It's okay. Remember I showed you the Alapin idea? We do the same exact thing. We play g6, ignore this, he takes, we transpose it to the Alapin. So you pretty much don't have to learn Smith-Morra Gambit if you play my setup with g6.
Okay, very good. So last question I have for you is what if they do the closed like rather these closed Sicilian King's Indian attack?
Yeah, when they don't play d4 and put the bishop on g2, right?
Yeah.
Again, typically people start with this move and then they play g3.
Mm-hmm.
So various move orders, right, can reach this setup. Now, what is characteristic about these positions, right? It's a slow strategic position, meaning that white wants to attack. If you make the pawn chain point to the king side, white wants to attack the king, which will likely castle. Black, though, this is the dragon formation, right? Black wants to swing with the tail, eventually get the b pawn thrown. I believe white's attack is not dangerous for black. And if we just kind of make some neutral moves, let's say knight f6, castles, h3, rook b8, a4, a6, the point is b5 is coming. And there's nothing white can do. If white plays f4, black has to be very careful not to play b5 just yet because e5 will hit the knight. So the correct move here is just simply knight d7, bishop e3. You can play knight d4 first to secure the central square. Let's say queen d2, b5. And b4 is coming really fast, while black's king is still quite safe. One of the big problems here for white is f5 weakens the e5 outpost, while it's not clear if white actually has any attack. For example, knight d1, and I believe black is doing quite well here. This beautiful bishop, nice centralized knight, and the king is completely safe.
Hey, check this video out to make sure that you get more important information to bring your chess to the next level.